There's people that will say, oh, like, I work 80 hours, but I only pay myself for 40, and then I don't even cash my check, right?
Right.
So then you look at your profit and loss statement, and you're like, damn, my labor's low.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the reality, it's only low because you're a volunteer in your business. And the chances of you finding someone else to come volunteer for 80 hours a week is very, very low. Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Scott, multi-unit location owner for almost 20 years, and now we help restaurant owners increase their sales, increase their bottom line profit, and help them spend more time with your family. Nathan is here with me. Welcome, Nathan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you back. So what we're going to talk about today is how to know how much you can pay yourself as a restaurant owner, because this is where a lot of owners get it wrong. I've seen everything from people not paying themselves at all to paying themselves way too much and wondering where all the money went. So we're going to dive into all things financial and really kind of get some clarity on that for you and some good financial practices around your business. So let's dive in first. So let's address the very first question. How do I know how much to pay myself? Now, this is going to be different for every situation because every business is going to be a little bit different. But here's what I can tell you. And this is a principle that I want you to write on your wall, on your arm, write it wherever you can, bathroom door, shower curtain, I don't care. Write it somewhere because you cannot spend more than you make, right? So that's number one. Oh, Andrew, I know that one already. Like that's pretty foolproof. But here's the thing. Your business also cannot spend more than it makes, meaning it has to have profit. And here's the other piece of it. In order for you as an owner to make the type of money that you want, you also need to have profit. But the amount you pay yourself has to be less than the profit that the business makes. So that's a hard and fast rule, right? So let's dive into this a little bit more. I guess, Nathan, question for you. In all of your travels and the restaurant journeys that you've been a part of and with the clients that we've served, well, what are some big things that kind of happen? What are some things that most restaurant owners do that maybe stand out in this area? Maybe mistakes they've made or things like that have kind of gotten people into trouble?
Well, I mean, a big mistake, in my opinion, and it's super basic, is that often owners will sacrifice, paying themselves for paying other bills, right? So I can barely make payroll, so I won't pay myself, but I'll make sure I pay my employees. I put myself behind my employees. I put them first. And in my mind, that's always a very dangerous place to put yourself in, because without taking care of yourself, you can't take care of the business, and your business cannot take care of its employees. So that's part of it. And then not
I
really
understand it though.
Yeah, not having a really clear line of sight to things like how much money does your business need to make? What sales do you need to do in order to pay yourself, to pay your employees, to pay your distributor? Not having a really clear line of sight to a break-even analysis.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, how many businesses actually have a strong break even and they know if they do X amount of sales, this is what should filter down to my bottom line, and then are looking at that and going, okay, of all the levers I can turn in my business, because basically as business owners, we are the people in a spaceship that are turning the levers and knobs and making this go faster and this thing and that thing and doing this and that. Like, that's basically our job as business owners, right? Whereas most restaurant owners probably feel like we are the people that are, fueling the spaceship and like pushing the spaceship to the launching pad. And like, that's probably, if there was a boat, you'd be the one rowing the boat. But in actuality, we are the people that are directing what's happening. We're the captains, right? And so we often get that construed. But Well, let me tell you my story. I mean, I started it, and I always paid my employees before myself because I wasn't going to sue myself. So if I didn't pay my employees, well, there you go. That's a problem. That's a labor board complaint right there. So we had to pay our employees. So we always did that. But having said that, if you're having struggles with that, your business needs to make more money, and so you should probably stop listening to this podcast and go listen to one where we talk about how to increase your profitability with your restaurant. So that's probably where you should stop and do that. But if you are making money and you're like, hey, how do I know how much to pull out? How do I know how to set it up? Like those kind of things. That's more of what, we'll talk about today. So I guess the first thing we need to understand would be more like the difference in between profit and cash flow. Because Nathan, I'm sure that you've probably heard people that, they show up to their accountant at the end of the year and your accountant's like, hey, you made money. You've got a tax bill of $5,000 or whatever. And then you go, okay, great. Like, well, where's the money? Where's the profit that I made? And they're like, it's on this sheet of paper. I'm like, oh, sweet. Can I take this piece of paper and put it in the bank? They're like, no, the money's, I don't know, it's already gone. And you already spent it, And you're like, well, what do you mean? And now I have to pay taxes on this money that I didn't get, right? So that's a fundamental thing where people don't understand the difference in between profit and cash flow. So let me break it down for you. Profit is what your profit and loss statement says. But cash flow are other things that go out. And now there's some other things that can decrease your bank account balance. This would appear on your balance sheet. So again, if you know what a profit and loss statement is, great. How often are you looking at your balance sheet? Because that is the second piece that goes hand in hand with this. Because let's just say you took out an SBA loan or a bank loan or whatever the case might be. You take out a loan. The interest is an expense, so therefore it goes on your profit and loss statement. But what about those principal repayments? Where does that go? That's not on your profit and loss statement. That is on your balance sheet. That's where that is, right? So if, you took a loan and you're paying it back, that's where that lives, right? If you took a draw for yourself that wasn't under payroll, if you don't have yourself as an employee, that's where you would be taking a dividend or it would be a shareholder loan or whatever the case is. So that's going to be on your balance sheet. And so most people construe this because you need to make more than enough profit to actually cover your loan repayments and paying you, right? So let me make sure we say that clearly, because I believe that you shouldn't necessarily pay yourself on payroll because you're going to double up on things like payroll taxes, and there's other things. Anyway, that this is not an accounting discussion, and just so you know, I am not a licensed CPA, so I'm not giving financial advice just for legal reasons. Let me just state that. But as a business owner who has done this myself, and so that's the frame that I come from. So I always paid myself through dividends. But here's the thing. I always took a look at, what did my business make? Therefore, what percentage of that can I pay myself? What can I take out, right? So that's the first thing we need to understand, okay? Everybody got that? Okay, everybody listening, give me a big thumbs up. Okay, if you're driving, everybody's going to be like, wow, that dude's weird. Okay, so next thing we need to understand is also how to actually understand your business when you are working in the business. So Nathan, I'm sure you see this a lot. There's people that will say, oh, I work 80 hours, but I only pay myself for 40, and then I don't even cash my check, right?
Right.
So then you look at your profit and loss statement and you're like, damn, my labor's low.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the reality, it's only low because you're a volunteer in your business. And the chances of you finding someone else to come volunteer for 80 hours a week is very, very low. So the reason I'm having this discussion is we're talking about owner pay and you're like, but I work in the business and stuff like that. So here's what I want everyone to understand is that yes, you may be subsidizing your business by giving them free labor, right? But the way we should be looking at our expenses, because again, I want us to look at this as, is there a problem in the business or is the problem with how I'm paying myself and structuring it? Most of the times there's a problem with the business. So here's what you have to understand is that when you do your calculations on your profit and loss statement, say you pay yourself $2,000, but the amount that you would have paid someone else to do that job, hiring in a manager at whatever rate is going in your area, maybe that's going to be $6,000. Maybe it's going to be 10,000. Maybe who knows what. So what you should actually do is put that number, write it in on your P&L so you know what your numbers actually are for labor without subsidizing it. Because if you want to make the choice to subsidize your own business and volunteer, that's your choice. It'll keep cash in the business short term because it's not going to you, right? But long term, it could actually mean that there's a big problem in the business that you're not addressing because you have volunteered yourself and you have a skewed perspective on how your business is actually performing, right? Just because it says you have 20% labor, it would actually be 40 if you paid yourself. Well, then your labor's really 40 and that's a problem, not 20. So yeah, you have low labor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's rose-colored glasses, right? We lie to ourselves in that space. And when we talked about something like a break-even analysis, and I know we probably won't dig into exactly what that is on this call, but understanding that your pay is a part of the expense structure of your organization, and it has to be honored like absolutely anything else, like paying a food bill, like paying electricity. It's a part of the viability of the potential profit and potential performance of your business. And I would throw this out because this is maybe a little off skew, but if you ever go to sell your business or have it valuated and you have not been paying yourself and you are in the business, that also kicks you in the butt because it's a tracked expense or an expense that is not being tracked, I should say, and is not a part of the valuation. So your pay is an expense and it has to be factored into the real health check of your operations. And like you said, if your labor looks like 20, but it's really 40, if we don't track it that way, we don't look at it that way, then we're never going to address it the way it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, then you're not going to solve the problem, right? And so then you're like, oh, my labor's low. And then all of a sudden, once you finally get some stuff figured out, like we see this with clients sometimes, they'll start getting things figured out. Then they start working a little bit less and they're like, oh shit, my labor went from 20 to 30%. I'm like, well, really, it was always 40. That's so, right. Yeah. 30 is still way better. But because it wasn't on there, they didn't quite realize it. So we just don't want to dilute ourselves. We want to make business decisions in fact, because without proper data, we can't make proper decisions, right? So that's the fundamental piece of business. The numbers do not lie. They tell a story. So we got to figure out what story the numbers are telling us. So that's one thing I want to make sure we do. But now everyone's probably confused. But Andrew, you're talking about paying yourself, and then you're saying that we shouldn't pay ourselves, but we're in the business and stuff like that. So here's what I would say is I do believe that you should pay yourself. But here's another thing. I hate seeing restaurant owners not pay themselves and work in the business. The reason why I hate that is because then you just don't pay yourself because you can go without money and stuff like that. But it just kicks the can further down the road. Because picture it this way. Picture if you actually paid yourself what you were worth. Let's say you looked at what a management wage would be and you paid yourself that for the amount of hours you put in and whatever that number is. Could your business pay you that right now? For a lot of restaurants, they'll be like, well, no, it couldn't afford that. It couldn't afford an $80K or an extra $100K salary or something like that. There's no way it could afford it. And so then imagine if you started paying yourself that, then your business would go under because all of a sudden you would be taking more cash out of the business than it could afford. What that tells us, though, is that there's a problem in the business to solve, right? It means that the business isn't profitable enough where it is, so therefore we need to solve it. But because we're not actually trying to pay ourselves what it should be, and we're just like, okay, I'll just not pay myself. I'll just not pay my mortgage this month. Like those are the types of decisions people are making. And so what you're doing is you are actually just kicking the can down the road. You're making the problem less bad. You're solving it temporarily by putting a Band-Aid over it. But in your brain, you're like, okay, now that I've done this, things aren't as bad in the business. When in reality, you should be like, holy shit, I need to solve this right now. Here's another example of that. I'm sure some people are listening to this that have taken out merchant loans, from, I don't want to go into the people that do them, but one of the biggest things, and we have clients that come to us, man, like they're taking like $10,000 a month from me, and they're ridiculously expensive. So I have a whole video that talks about all of that. So check that out on YouTube if you want to, on how to kind of get out of those and what you need to know. Biggest problem is that people take the money and then they're like, phew, the problem's solved. The problem is that capital is not your problem, It's a symptom of the problem. Because you needed to go and put money in the business, that means there's a problem with your business. And not having money is not the problem. It is a symptom of the problem. Because if you had a more profitable business, you would have more money, right? And so what people do is they take these merchant loans and they're like, whew, I got 30 grand or 40 grand or whatever, even though it costs them through the nose and probably a small child to pay it back. But the point is, they do this and then they don't change their business because they're like, whew, things will just get better. They don't make the changes in their business. I had someone that actually had PPP money, like 200,000 or something like that. And literally they had their account balance, 200 grand. They were living, when I say living large, I don't actually mean they were spending it on, crazy things, but they were just not making the changes. It's like, yeah, we got money. You know what? If our labor's a little over, not a big deal. Food costs are not a big deal. Do we need to raise prices? Nah, it's fine. And so then
I'm comfortable for right now.
Yeah, it's fine. We can sustain a loss. And then eventually that money got down to like $10,000 from 200 in their operating account. And they were like, shit, well, now I got to solve it. I'm like, no, you needed to solve it back then, not now. But that's the problem, is that we get deluded in thinking that the problem's not as big as what it actually is. So that's kind of what I wanted to make a clear point about, is because sometimes we are actually deluding ourselves. And so we're redirecting thoughts from the problem actually being in the business. Because the thing is, you won't be able to take out the money that you need to in the business if your business isn't first profitable. So that's step one, have a freaking awesome business. That's step one. Okay. So now that we've covered that, let's move on to taking money out of the business, because this is the next thing that people are a little bit confused about. Hey, real quick, if you're a multi-unit restaurant owner or you're looking to become one, I've identified the 3 deadliest mistakes that are killing most restaurants right now. And more importantly, I'll show you how to avoid these exact mistakes. Just grab my free copy of the Multi-Unit Restaurant Playbook by going and clicking on the link in the description below. Inside, you'll discover my proven system for building a restaurant empire that runs on autopilot and the mistakes you must avoid if you want to stay profitable and scalable. So get the free playbook and transform your business today. Because they get confused about how much money do I take out. Now, I've seen it go a couple different ways. Most of the time, people will take out too much money because they don't really know how much their business makes. They don't really know how much they can, and then they'll freak out and be like, oh my God, how can I have no money? And it turns out, they bought a really nice Coach bag and they took this vacation to Vegas. And Mel, I'm talking to you if you're listening. I see you. This is a live story from one of my friends. It happened about 6 years ago. Anyway, she had a really nice bag though, and all of a sudden these thousands of dollars just because you have a business account. Oh yeah, it's got lots of money in it and stuff like that. But you need a lot of that money, because you have swings and expenses. And anyway, we don't want to take out more than what the business actually makes. And sometimes people can say, oh, my business is broke because they're taking out too much personally. So you just have to be able to live within your means because you can't spend more than you make. So here's how I kind of look at it. If your business, say, makes $10,000 a month or something like that, my hard and fast rule is you could probably take 50 or 60% of that out. That's kind of like my general rule of thumb. Is you can set your salary level. Like if last year your business made 100,000 or whatever, something like that, you can probably take 50, 60% of that. Here is why I say 50 to 60%, is because we don't want to bleed our business dry, but we also need to install some buffers. Because I'm sure you've heard the phrase, make hay while the sun shines. Nothing lasts forever. There's a song by I think they won Best Musical in the Tony Awards back in 2006. The song called "It's Only for Now" by a musical Avenue Q. Anyway, if anyone's a fan of musicals, you might know that one. Anyway, so point is, nothing lasts forever. When things are great, guess what's going to happen? Shit's going to go wrong. And then when shit goes wrong, guess what's going to happen? It's going to get better. So what we need to do is understanding we are a business of seasons, and there's good seasons and bad seasons, and we need to prepare for the bad seasons when it's good. And then when it's bad, we need to do the work to make it good, right? So there's work to be done in all seasons of our business. And so what we often don't do, though, is we're coming into summer. As we're filming this, it's spring, but we're getting into summer. And what a lot of people, probably by the time this airs, it'll be midsummer to late summer. But point is, things are probably pretty good for a lot of businesses, that thrive in the summertime. And they're going to be like, yeah, the bank account's full, awesome. They could spend a little more freely. They're probably not going to be as concerned about their average check, about their labor costs, about their food costs, stuff like that. And then what'll happen is all of a sudden fall turns around, maybe their sales shrink in fall. And then they're going to be like, damn, what happened? And then they're going to freak out. But had they prepared in summertime differently, knowing what was coming, they would be in a much different position. So here's an example of that. The reason I say 50 to 60% you can take out is because you should be putting 10 to 20% away in different buffers. And here is how I do that. First and foremost, I start by having my main operating account. There's always like a limit where you get free banking for most banks if you have it up a certain balance or whatever. So like I try and kind of, get in that realm. But what happens is eventually once your bank account hits a certain level, then you want to spill that over into my next one, which is a business savings account. So again, this pays you like nothing for interest, but it pays you something at least. But I put that in a separate account to the side. And I usually the way I used to do it was I would take it whenever my bank account hit a new high, like say it was 50,000 and then it got to 60,000. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to take $5,000 out, put it in my savings. Okay. And then I kept doing that as the business account grew. Right. And I was paying myself at the same time, stuff like that. Then once that got up to say, 50,000 or whatever the case is. And again, these numbers are all dependent on your business. If you have a much smaller business where you're doing like 40, 50,000, you probably don't want to have 50 grand sitting in your account, right? It could be much lower, like 20 or 30. And your savings account could then, maybe tap out. You're trying to get about 3 to 6 months of your fixed expenses. So for most businesses, we're probably talking like 25,000, 40,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So once you get that set aside, then I started rolling it over into either GICs or investments or, mutual funds or like, ETFs, whatever you want to do, which is long-term savings in the business. The reason why is because depending on the corporate structure you have, it's tax advantageous to let the money grow in the business. Because at least for my corporate setup, once I take the money out personally, I get hit with a much bigger tax bill than if it's housed in a corporation. So that's one thing that I do. But contact your CPA and legal team to find out what's the best for you. But point is, I would leave it so I'd have a savings buffer, and then I would also have an investment buffer. So there's 2 steps, one of which was completely liquid. The other one was semi-liquid in the sense of you might not want to sell it if the economy is bad or whatever, but at least it's quicker access to it than having it locked up in, say, a property or something like that will take longer to sell, stuff like that. So the reason why I do that is because sometimes things go bad and you need to access that money. Sometimes you might go through a period where, hey, I want to open up a new location. Well, guess what? That's going to take cash. Where's the cash? Right? Oh, things might go bad. Sales might go down. For seasonal restaurants, this is especially crucial. You need to stock up when things are good because you got to survive the winter. Otherwise, you're never going to reopen the next spring. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So my whole point is I have a system of buffers. And then if things ever go down, say my walk-in breaks. Let's just say you had to have a whole new walk-in, It's a $10,000, $15,000 bill, something like that. Just picture that for a second. Where are you going to get that money? Your AC goes in your building or whatever, right? You have to pay to fix that. That's happened to me, And all of a sudden, they're coming after you for $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever. Where's that money going to come from, right? And so if all of a sudden you have this little savings buffer, you're like, oh, well, I can easily just contribute half from my savings. So say the bill was $10,000. You use $5,000 from your operating account, so it gets a little hit, but then you subsidize with $5,000 from your savings. Perfect. You're not super stressed. You still move on. It's just one of those things that happens and you're ready for it. Whereas, picture you taking all the money out and spend it because you're living large and you got these coach bags and vacations and all that kind of stuff. So you're like, man, I'm rich. It's awesome. I'm not saying a ton of restaurant owners would ever say that, but you should. If you do things right. So again, we want to have goals, right? That's part of being in business. But point is that if you do not prepare for that type of stuff, then you go, oh shit, I now have to not pay myself, or I have to go borrow money from someone, or I have to be late on my vendor. Because here's the number one rule we have to understand is that something will always go wrong, right? So there's
We don't
always
know
going
what
to
it
happen.
is, but we know it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. And
100%.
just our luck, it's going to cost us money. Like that's the reality of it, right? Shit's going to cost you money and shit's going to go wrong. So we might as well prepare for it. And so that's why I never take all of the profit. So it used to be I would look at my monthly profit and loss. Hey, great. We made 20 grand or whatever. Great. I'm going to take 10 of that, Or if we made 5, okay, I'm going to take 2,500 of it. Whatever the case is, I still left some of the business because in the business we need to reinvest in our growth. We need to prepare for the downtimes. So that's just what most people don't understand. They just pay themselves a fixed amount, and they roll with that. Another thing I used to do when I got to making like a lot more money, what I started to do then was once my bank account hit a new high, what I would do is I would take some to move it to the savings, and then I would take another portion and I would pay it out as a dividend personally. So that's, I got rewarded for that. So I'd start distributing it a little bit more heavily. Once I knew that, okay, the business is roughly going to make whatever amount it was. Okay, I'm going to pay myself a salary of like less than that. So then I did set that up, and then I started rewarding myself more for dividends. But those are just a couple ways that I've kind of went through that and figured out how can I pay myself, all while saving to make sure the business is stable in the future and preparing for when things are not good. But then also realizing that there were times when I couldn't pay myself. So I realized there was a problem with the business, and so that's what I needed to fix in order to get to where I eventually got to. So I know that's a lot of information, and some of it might not be relevant for you guys right now, and that's okay. But I wanted to lay out just a different way of thinking about things, because then we can get into the personal side as well and how we set our personal side up a little bit differently, just so that we are protected there too. Because, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. You take money out, and like I remember taking money out, and it was like $300. These are back in like early days. I was barely making anything. I was like, yeah, I invested $300 in a tax sheltered. It was an RSP, but picture it as a 401k for anyone in the U.S. So I, put it in there. And then sure enough, 2 months later, I had to sell it. And I got like dinged taxes on it and like fees, like early withdrawal fees and all. And it even went down in value. And I'm like, well, that's the last time I freaking invest anything. That's just what I thought at the time. But the reality is that I just didn't match what I was taking out to what my business actually could sustain. And I didn't have those savings buffers in place. And here's the other thing. Everyone always says, pay yourself first. And I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense when you don't have a business that may need that money. And so here's what I would say your business needs to get paid first, then your savings buffers need to get paid, and then you can pay yourself, right? So then you want to pay yourself first and like invest and do those important things, but not if it's going to put your business in jeopardy, because then it's always going to suck everything out of you more expensively if you don't do it right. So
let me throw one. This is maybe more of a thought exercise.
Sure.
And I talk about this with my clients and within my own business all the time. We know that there are times in the year where profit is easier, right? Mm-hmm. Probably, right? Probably most people listening to this podcast or watching it would say, during my peak time, hitting my goals, hitting my labor, hitting my prime costs, it's easy. It's easy. Right? I don't have to fight for it as much as I do when it's really slow. Here's a hard reality truth, or reality check, let's say. Hitting your profit should always be hard. Always. If you have those points in your business where, like you say, make hay when it's sunny, right?
Yep.
When things feel good and money is easy, you are missing out on an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Yep. You are not fighting for when profit is hard by letting off the gas, not looking for opportunity when profit is easy.
Okay, I've got a saying for you right now. When things get easy, that's when you go hard.
That's right. 100%. If you ever rest on your laurels, if you lean back on your heels and you're pulling foldable money out of your wallet because everything is great, guess what? You're going to pay for that later. There are consequences to that situation And how, when you talk about putting money into savings or even into investment savings accounts, and listen, there's a lot of ways to make sure your money is making you money. And if your money isn't making you money, ladies and gentlemen, you better make sure it is. But if it's easy, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
Is my 2 cents. Or you're missing an opportunity.
Why are your goals the same when you're naturally going to be more profitable as when you're less profitable?
That's right. If your labor is 30% every week, every month for the whole year, guess what? That is unrealistic. If hitting 30 at your peak volume is easy, guess what? Your labor shouldn't be 30. It should probably be 22. And guess what? When it's slow, your labor target shouldn't be 30. Maybe it needs to be 40. When as owners, what we really want to be able to do, in my opinion, is to be able to fly up and look at the whole year.
Yep.
Evaluate the peaks and valleys. Plan for the valleys, maximize the peaks because they support the execution in the valleys, and have an overarching plan that gets you to the end of the year. As an owner, profit at the end of the year is the game we play, not week to week. If we know where we need to be at the end of the year, we can manage month to month or quarterly and then back down to weekly and daily.
Yep. Here's the deal, though. When I look at it, everyone always tells me, Andrew, I need to get more sales in my slow months. How many of you guys have said that? Everyone listens, if I could only get my slow month, it's at like 40. If I could only get it up to 50 or 60, everything would be greater. But how many of you guys have said, man, how can I get and let's just say you're doing 80 in your peak in summer, right? So you've got a peak of 80, trough of 40. So, man, how do I get my peak to be 100? How many people ask that question? But most people focus on where they're slower when you know what, maybe that's always going to be slow. Not saying you shouldn't try and improve it, but what I am saying is you shouldn't sleep on trying to improve it when you have the best chance of making the most profitability possible. When you're busiest, right? How come we're not trying to make it busier at that point, right? It's different if you're on a wait all the time and there's no way you could possibly do it. But even then, how do we turn tables quicker? How do we develop maybe a to-go program? How do we all of a sudden, upsell more so we can make more for, there's a ton of different ways to do it when you're really busy, but we're not thinking about that because we're busy enough, we're good enough, right? So let's still focus when things get easy, go hard and make it even better, right? 100%. And so, by the way, that is an Alex Hormozy quote. I think it actually might have come from Layla, but anyway, I just want to throw that out there. That's not my quote. Don't take credit for it. But it's always stuck in my head. When things get easy, that's when you go hard. So, Well, I think we've covered a few things today. The only other thing I'll just mention is from the personal side is you also have to manage your personal expenses. You should also be saving personally and making smart decisions personally with that money. But I think the overarching thing is we earn the right to do that from having a great business that makes us profit and preparing for when things are not great. And then from that, we earn the ability to reward ourselves personally. We can't reward ourselves personally before the business is ready because then you'll just end up putting that money right back into the business. And we just want to avoid that. And so we just need to be real about it. And we need to know our numbers. And if you're a restaurant owner that's like, I don't really know my numbers that much, or I don't really know, I don't get regular, statements from my accountant, fire your accountant, number one. And get someone who's going to give you statements minimum every month, right? So, because with that clarity, we can then make changes. Because we are business owners. Because if you were just treating your business like you're an employee and you just work there and you do all the work and stuff like that, and you're not running it like a business where you're always going to be stuck in that place. But if you want a business that runs for you, works for you, and generates the kind of life that you deserve, that takes a different set of skills and a different mindset. And so if that's what you're looking for, that's what I want you guys to listen to this podcast for. And if you're really interested, you can give us a call. We can show you how we can do that too. Nathan will work directly with you, as will I. And all that fun stuff. But having said that, I hope you guys learned some things. I hope it might have shaken up your understandings of how things happen financially and move the needle in the future. So you've got more cash in your account and more of those foldable bills during the good times, like Nathan said.
Foldable money.
Awesome, guys. All right. Well, we'll catch you on the next one. And have a good one.
Bye, guys.
This episode is brought to you by Ownership Training, where we help restaurant owners increase their profits while spending more time with their family. And if you want to know exactly what it would take to grow your profit margin to 15% and beyond while spending more time with your family, my team has a few spots open this week for a free 15-minute restaurant assessment call. Just click the book a call link in the description and we'll show you the exact frameworks we're using to help our clients do this in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.